PLD. PJ Campbell. Two mediocre white dudes on film. Because frankly, we know you don't have enough of that in your life. So we're here to give you more. And without further ado, here are two mediocre white dudes on film.
And we're back.
What's I didn't even like jump for it. I didn't let you do it. I was like,
try this time.
I didn't.
You know, it was kind of nice. You've been trying to be more assertive over me lately, and I don't know what caused this sort of rift.
I'm not sure.
Relationship.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
It stops today.
It did. It did stop today. I think we're both on the same page. We're both just having good times with this series. That might be part of it because, damn, I love Indiana Jones. And
I mean, I do too, man. It's all timer every time. I mean, every one of these movies, I love them for different reasons. And yes, that clearly means that when we get to Crystal Skull, like we've talked about in the past, y'all better buckle up because I'm going to be having the time of my life talking about that movie.
I am telling you that actually, I feel like the movie is slowly getting the reconsideration. Like I'm feeling a little bit more and more. Some people are kind of starting to give it a little bit of its due, maybe a little begrudgingly, but like, I mean, so we were there since day one, motherfuckers. So we were there the entire time, but you're all starting to come around.
Hipstery and gatekeepery about it, but we were here first.
That's right.
But the difference is as gatekeepers, we open the gate and we welcome all of you because we want more people to love the movie the way we do.
Absolutely. Sometimes I'll just satisfy. I'll be satisfied with liking the movie. I'll be good with that. Let's put it that way.
I mean, look, man, I'll take what I can get at this point. If people come around on it, I'm just happy to see them do it. And before anyone asks us later about the cans reactions of it all, I don't give a shit.
Yeah,
who gives a shit?
Single shit, not one.
Like, I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't want to talk about the Dial of Destiny of it all because at the end of the day, I haven't made up my mind, obviously, whether I'm gonna love it or not. The hope is obviously I'm gonna love it, but also Can's reactions really don't mean anything to me.
No.
And if you read most of the reviews, they all kind of sound like if you didn't love Crystal Skull, you're going to kind of have the same problems, which is just sort of reiterating my whole take that it seems like certain people don't know how to separate the original trilogy from anything that people do with the character after the fact.
Right.
And, you know, that it's a totally valid take. If you want to have that take, it's not one I clearly subscribe to because I think it's actually limiting in seeing what you can do with the character and the property. But, you know, you go on your way and do what you're going to do or whatever.
Absolutely.
And that is what it is. But yeah, so I don't give a shit.
I don't either. I mean, I'll say it point blank when it comes to the Indiana Jones franchise. Maybe I'm a tolerant guy. Maybe I'm just too easy to please. I don't care. If it's got Harrison Ford, it has the hat, it has the whip, it has a John Williams score, I have a feeling I'm going to enjoy myself. The only question is how much. That's really the question. How much am I going to enjoy myself?
Yeah, right. Exactly. And so that's kind of where I'm at with the whole thing because we had people who kept bothering us about it. And I was like, you know, man, I just don't care.
Yeah, sometimes like it's okay to not like sometimes I feel like in this space, in the film space, it's just something we all love, something we all like. We take time out of our lives, like our lives and our work, and this is our kind of our escape from things. So sometimes when we engage with some people who take it extremely seriously or get like really up in arms about every minute detail, like in a negative fashion, like to me, I'm kind of like, I just don't need to engage with you. I'm fine with that. Like you have your own opinion, go your own way. It's not, it just feels disingenuous to me. I'd much rather talk about something I love than talk about something why you hate something.
Yeah, it's actually why I'm like very slowly kind of stepping back from the space as a whole and even like film Twitter and stuff because it thrives on negativity and I'm just exhausted by it. Like negativity goes pretty much nowhere.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you can't have feelings about certain things, et cetera, nothing like that. But I don't know. I don't always think it's all good faith, personally speaking.
I mean, I don't even care. Honestly, I would, despite what I just said, if you didn't like and King of Crystal Skull, I mean, that's fine. You didn't like it. Okay. I mean, you want to have a conversation about why I didn't like it? Sure, that's fine. But at the end of the day, it's like I don't want to have a long, hour long, 2 hour long debate about what makes it shitty versus what I like about it. It's just okay. You didn't like it. It's not for you. Move on to the next one. Go back and watch. Go back and watch Temple of Doom, which is today's conversation we're going to have.
Yeah, no, 100%. Although I'll say, as a Lucasfilm limited production, etc., I feel like we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the passing of Ray Stevens, which came very, very shockingly yesterday. It
Yeah.
One of the projects will be the Ahsoka series, where he plays the villain of the series, as
Right.
you've been led to believe. Way too young. Real shocking. 57?
58, I think it was. Or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, but either way, Ray Stevenson, I mean, he was such a joy to watch. I mean, he brought such pleasure to to Punisher Warzone, to Rome, to
God, Punisher Warzone, so
yeah,
good.
I
G.I.
know.
Joe Retaliation.
Triple R.
Uh-huh.
I mean, the voice of Gar Saxon in the animated Star Wars universe, and I remember like my most recent dealings with him, like as far as like ingesting his interviews and stuff, was at Celebration, and he was so excited about Ahsoka and getting to play
Have a
with a
lightsaber.
lightsaber, and
Yeah.
he just felt like a little kid at 58. I mean, it was just joyous and effective. I was very excited to see him in Ahsoka because of that. And now I heard the news, and like I don't even know if it's ever even come out. All I've read was like he was filming a movie in Italy. He contracted some illness, went to the hospital, and all of a sudden, like a couple days later, he was gone. And it's like, how does it happen? How does it happen in this day and age? I don't know.
It's just really sad. Just,
Yeah.
very sudden. And it's so weird because, like, even in the Marvel movies, he was in the Thor films.
Yeah,
And,
Volstagg.
like, yeah, he was Volstagg, and very small part in the third, like, almost no dialogue, small. But I always liked his presence in the first movie, and I always thought he was such a perfect casting for that. And his Punisher is just great. I mean, that movie is a grindhouse film made with a budget. It's fantastic.
Absolutely.
And just kind of a bummer because, again, he was just such a presence, and I always enjoyed seeing the stuff that he could do. And I looked forward to when he would pop up and stuff. I didn't even realize he was in RRR until I started it the
Yeah,
night
me
that
either.
I was watching it. And, Frankie had been pushing you and I to watch it for so long.
That's right.
And yet he never even talked about the fact that both Ray Stevenson and Allison Duty from Last Crusade, which we will get into next week, or next podcast rather.
Right.
You look at that and it's like, man, what a nice surprise. And he was so good in that too. He was just great playing that, British aristocrat type villain. Aristocrat, not aristocrat. Jesus.
There's a
It's
cat.
still early. I'm still waking up.
It's a completely different story.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, he had roles in so many different movies that I kind of forget about, like, because I guess he's not like he was never like a huge A-list star, so he doesn't get a lot of that kind of press.
Well, and he really didn't pop up until the 2000s because of Rome.
Yeah, Rome. I mean, but he also had stuff like we said. We loved Punisher Warzone. I remember him in the Book of Eli, Three Musketeers. He was in the Divergent series, whether you like that or not. I mean, he had a part in that for a bit. Yeah, but he really was. He always gave it his all. He always seemed like a joyous individual, and like it's that kind of guy that you just hate to see. You hate to see die young. I mean, you hate to see anybody die young, but someone who just feels like he's so full of life. It's something it's hard to deal with. To be honest with you, it's hard to see our mortality.
It totally is, man. It bummed me out. I was really hoping that it was false reports because it seemed like it was coming kind of all from a bunch of Australian tabloids at one point, or Italian tabloids, and we were all going, well, let's wait to see what happens. But then it was like very quickly confirmed, which was the other thing, is they took no time in letting the rumors circulate, which is probably better.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make it easier.
No, not at all. It was very sad. I remember just being very surprised too, because 58 is so young.
Yeah.
It's a young man at that point still. You're not even, I mean, he had 3 children, and it's a sad thing, but
yeah, it really is. I don't know.
We'll give you a shout out there, Mr. Stevenson. May you rest in power, and thank you for your contributions for everything we've liked, and thank you for your contributions in general. I hope you rest, and I hope wish well for your family. So.
Yeah, 100%. Now, I before we jump into the funness of the rest of this episode,
Hmm.
I'd like to be less downery for half a second here.
Yeah, sure.
It's blockbuster season.
It is. I know where you're going
And,
with this.
we talked last week or last episode. I'm gonna keep saying the week thing, I think. I don't know what's happening.
I think you
It's
are.
still but we talked about a little movie that had come out called Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3
Right,
and
right.
how much we loved it and how moving we felt it was and felt like it was like this perfect start of the summer blockbuster season,
Yeah,
right? Yeah. We all
we did.
remember that.
Do you remember that? I remember
All
that.
right. So the second big blockbuster movie of the summer hit on Friday or Thursday night, rather, depending on where you are. And that would be Fast X. And I just want to
Fasten
shout out,
our seatbelts.
yeah, I just want to shout out the most absurdly fun movie I've had in so long of just
Yeah.
sitting in a theater, smashing popcorn into my face, where this movie had no right to be nearly as fun as it is. Louis Leterrier injected new life into a very aging franchise to this point, and it is some of the most fun I've had with this series in a long goddamn time.
Oh, we talked about it off air a little bit, and I'll pitch it forth here. We do think that probably Justin Lin moving on was probably the best thing that happened because not because Justin Lin's a bad director, but his heart definitively wasn't in it. I think he was doing the rest in Justin Lin face for even longer than the picture would suggest. Beginning,
Yeah.
I think, well, that's even as long as F9 because F9 did not seem nearly as fun and nearly as passionate. Lewis, let's say, just really just kind of he stuck a foot up the ass of the franchise and really kicked it into gear. Really had a lot of fun with it. And someone else said too, by the way, there's one Jason Momoa who really
Jason
just.
fucking
I
Momoa,
mean, he knows what movie he's in more than Vin
and it
Diesel
is
does in this way.
glorious.
Really,
I guarantee you that Vin thinks he's in Shakespeare. And it's so hysterical to me because Momoa knows that he is in an 80s B schlocky comic book adaptation
with a big budget.
with a huge budget, and he goes for it.
100%. And he's exactly right. Because every time you watch Vin Diesel do it, he looks like he's trying to outperform everybody. He's trying to win an Oscar. And I don't know. I think it actually helps the movie, though. Sometimes somebody taking it that seriously, as long as everyone else around you kind of knows what they're doing and everyone else
Yeah.
around him seems to know what he's doing. So, Vin, go ahead, self-delude yourself as much as you want. Have a good time, and everybody else will have a great time with you because everybody else knows what they're doing, but especially Momoa. What I wish he'd been in the franchise earlier. I wish we had seen him since 5.
No joke, dude. Well, and then I gotta say, Cena is a delight in this movie too,
What
because
happened
he
between 9 and then 10? Really?
what a one. Well, I mean, obviously, it's a massive character change,
Right.
so the character could be played differently.
Right.
But it's such a 180 performance of like the brooding villain who he was trying to go toe to toe with Diesel, like acting wise in the
Yep.
last movie. But in this one, he's just fun Uncle John Cena, and it is the best. Like, I thought he was so charming and so fun.
Yeah, I gotta say, like, he was very much more John Cena. When you hire John Cena, you kind of want to get that John Cena charm. He's had that since his days in WWE, and like every time he's got that knack for comedy. That's like it's kind of hard.
Good at it, man.
Yeah, he's good at it. It's hard to see him without that. And that's what we had in F9. It wasn't the same type of thing. It's like you got John Cena, but you're going to put him in this kind of box. Well, you let him out of the box for Fast 10, and man, it was something to behold. He was fun. He was energetic. He felt like he fit right in again. He too felt like he knew what franchise he was in suddenly. Like somebody opened his eyes and said, "Oh, this is the kind of movie I'm in. Okay, let's do this."
No, 100%. And that's kind of how I felt overall as we've been, talking about this movie over the last week or so, because the more I think about it, the more I'm just kind of happy and blown away that it is as fun as it ultimately is.
Right.
Because I'm going to be honest, once you lose a director midstream, you can't assume things are going to turn out great.
Right.
And yet, for some reason, man, it just worked out phenomenally.
Yeah.
In the right way. And I got to say, the action sequences are some of the best that this franchise has ever had.
Yeah.
And Leterrier shoots the hell out of them.
Mm-hmm.
And he gives all the characters kind of bigger moments, which I was happy about too. Charlize and Statham got real action beats that those characters have been dying to get in the main franchise for a long time anyway.
Mhm.
And it was cool that I could actually see what was going on. Like Leterrier is an action stars director. He
Yeah,
always has been.
absolutely.
It's why he worked with Jet Li. It's why he's worked with Statham. It's why you know, that's why they chose him. And it
Mhm.
makes sense. The dude is good, man. And the funny thing is the opening of the film at the Vatican, because that is the opening of the movie. That's not the end. I think people think that's the end of the movie. No, that's the opening of the movie. Is a little Raiders of the Lost Ark inspired.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
The
Just
a
throwing it
big
out there.
rolling rock. Actually, you mentioned Charlize. I did want to throw this out there. I think Charlize was the best she's been in the franchise the entire time, and I'm so happy that she's arrived as well. Um, and part of that has to do with like she got to do more. It's kind of like the John Cena thing. She got to do more than be just the brooding villain. But like it seems like she's been relegated to well, it's Charlize with a bad haircut in the past couple of movies,
Yeah.
basically. But she felt in like 5 minutes, she felt more at home in the franchise than she has the entire time through. And her scene, obviously, with Michelle Rodriguez, which is a classic, fun, fast battle. And man, she kicks ass. And I want to see more of her.
Mhm. It seems like Dante also is gonna be the only villain that they don't try to redeem in some capacity. The Fast movies
Oh,
have done a good job so far at, like, kind of taking the villains and inviting them to the barbecue, which I gotta say, kind of funny that the movie actually leans on that
yeah, it
a
does.
little bit.
It
Uh,
does.
like, they definitely joke about it, and I thought that was really funny. And that's not a
Yeah.
spoiler alert, it's just true. Like, look at the trajectory so far of these films. Like, The Rock,
Hmm.
to Vin's case, Brian,
Yeah.
like, going back to the first one, this is kind of how it's gone, and so, it's just kinda funny to me that they're doing that.
Well, I did the whole. I like the whole thing they did. Yeah, Alan Rich in there, Jack Reacher, uh, opens up part of his segment with the basically you saw everything that went down past like 10 movies. Here's your catch up.
Yeah.
What's gone down. I gotta say, I think I can't be the only one that thinks the only way this is possibly going to end, whether you like it or not, and I do because of the franchise you're in, is the CGI'd Paul
Oh,
Walker coming back
Brian's coming back.
to save the day. He'll be like the final act of the thing. He'll come back out of nowhere, save the day, and that's how we're going to end the series. I think whether it's part 2 or part 3, whatever event and the studio decides going to happen.
Yeah. I
It's doing well enough now. I think he might get that 3. He might get
Yeah,
that
I
3.
think so too. I mean, it made $300 million its opening weekend
Mm-hmm.
worldwide already. Are you kidding me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're gonna bankroll 2 more, and, it's out there. I don't wanna talk about it too much, but it if you know, you know, and there's a reason that they're gonna extend this out an extra movie because the addition.
Mm-hmm. The final, these
Yeah, I'm
bonus
trying to find a
scenes.
way to say
Yeah,
this the
we
right
know.
way, but the parts that are added at the end of the film,
In the post credit
it
scene, yeah,
yeah, well,
and
and
the
just
last scene, yeah, that's
yeah, I
true.
was gonna
Last,
say,
yeah.
just the last 2 scenes alone, they offer us a glimpse, if you will, at additional parts being added to the franchise, and I now see why. Also, curious fact, and I didn't see this until this morning. Apparently, the Alan Richardson role it was meant for Keanu Reeves.
Oh, really?
Cool. Yeah, and he ended up not being able to do it. So it also, to that point, it does make me continue to wonder if we're gonna have a bigger reveal down the line that the Hobbs and Shaw character that was originally meant for Keanu and this
Are one of the
are
same.
one and the same.
Mhm. Could be. Could very well be. It would make a lot of sense. And let's like just put everything together. Let's put all of the lay all the
Yeah,
cards on the
since
table for the end.
since it seems like everyone's playing nice and this is kind of where we're at now.
Yeah, it is. I
So
mean, it's kind of like the Avengers Endgame of the Fast
oh,
franchise universe.
that's
So
exactly what it is. I wasn't gonna say it, but that is 100% accurate. They're clearly Infinity War endgaming this franchise,
right.
which totally fine with.
Yeah, me too.
Totally
Like
cool.
I remember reading some dissent from people who don't basically people who don't like this movies, they just they haven't accepted what fast is. And I used to be one of those people. I gotta be honest with you. Back in the day, I was kind of like, I just didn't get it. It's like you're stupid. And you kind of just want at some point you give in, and you're like, it just flips a switch for you, and all of a sudden you're like, yeah, I get it now. I get it, and I love it. But like, if you're like, well, now there's no stakes because everybody dies, everybody comes back, everybody does this, and I'm like, yeah, you know what? That's what this movie is. These are comic book movies. They're gonna come back. You're gonna love it, and you're not gonna love it. Either way, you have to make your decision. Are you in or are you out? And if you're in all the way at this point.
And that's exactly it. I mean, I felt like I said it pretty perfectly when I tweeted out my initial reaction. It was like, look, if you're in the bag for these movies at this point, either you're in or you're
Yeah,
not.
exactly.
And
You're family or you're not. You're drinking the Corona or you're not, and that's all there
right,
is to it.
right. And that's where I was at, where I am 100% in the bag for these fast food movies. And I'm not mad about it at all. I'm actually happy that I am so in the bag for them, to the point that it's just fun for me, man. Like, I know exactly what I'm getting into. Sometimes you just want a McDouble and some fries and a fucking Coke. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? I can go
Hmm.
anywhere and get a better meal, but
Hmm.
sometimes that artery clogging, greasy monstrosity of a fast food chain burger is exactly the thing I need.
It just hits the spot. And it's not to say we don't like our gourmet meals. We love our gourmet meals just as much, but
Yeah.
we can like both. There's room for both in our lives. So,
I mean, and again, I would say that you and I are very lucky that we are big horror aficionados, because at the time we look at the movies that we grew up at, and or grew up with, and the way we look at all of it, so many horror movies, especially a lot of the sequels, they all vary in like very massive quality.
yes.
And yet we learn to love and appreciate them the way that they are, instead of putting them into boxes, saying that they need to be X, Y, or Z.
Right.
And I think that's made me just appreciate movies more. And I think that's why when you hear me talk about certain things and people go, "Man, you just love everything." No, no.
Oh,
Number 1, hardly true, but I find the good in the things that I enjoy, and
absolutely. And
I'm
that's what you
very
should
good
do.
at that.
That's what you have to do. Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really not that difficult, though some people seem to make it that difficult, unfortunately. But that's
Uh,
okay.
yeah,
Speaking of
it is what
horror,
it is.
I do want to plug I watched all three volumes of the In Search of Darkness documentary. Recently got through them. And if you haven't, and you are a fan of horror, specifically 1980s horror, then you are doing yourself a disservice. It is a deep dive into pretty much almost every title imaginable. I got to learn so many movies I haven't seen ever, or I haven't seen in a while, haven't thought of in a while, and it really inspired me to. I'm going to go through and watch all the horror movies I can that I got a little bit informed on during this three-part, nearly 13, 14-hour documentary about 1980s horror. I started last night watching The Changeling with George C. Scott, and what a great film that was for its time, especially just a great classic ghost story with a great understated performance by George C. Scott. It was wonderful to start there, and I can't wait to see what I'm going to do further. And beyond that, I was excited to learn actually that they are making a In Search of Darkness kind of four now with the 1990s is next.
Oh,
So
nice.
they're doing a 1990 to 1994 is the first series part of the series they're going to do. So I can't wait for that to continue.
I need to watch those. I'm really glad you're enjoying them. I'm glad it pushed you to start watching some of those, like Changeling and things like that.
Yeah.
Changeling's a fascinating one, because I think in a world now where elevated horror as a term has become a thing,
Yeah.
that would 100% be considered elevated horror. And
Yep.
it just goes to show how useless that term actually is, because I've said it before and I'll say it again. Elevated horror has always existed. It's just psychological horror.
Yep.
Elevated horror is just a term to make people feel smarter for liking horror movies.
Yeah, it's either that or like I think probably having an actor the caliber of George C. Scott make something elevated, like having Hereditary, having I'm blanking on her name.
Oh, yeah, from Fright Night also. The
Yep,
great Fright Night remake. Wow, that's a
Tony Collette. Tony Collette.
thank
There you
you.
go. Thank you, guys. And
Well, even The
we're out of the
Exorcist,
throwdown game, guys. Been
right?
a while.
Even The Exorcist, Max von Sydow.
Yeah, you have kind
Like,
of
you
out
look at
both.
that, you put parts in that elevate the movies, but it's, again, I just think it's a term that we could kill.
Yeah, I agree. Horror has enough genres of its own, to be honest with you, that we don't need another one where it's like basically saying that is the good horror. No, fuck it.
Right.
It's all good. It's all good in its own way.
Right. I mean, it's not like we have elevated comic book movies. It's
Right.
either a comic book movie or it's not. I
Right.
love the people who start doting on stuff like The Dark Knight and Logan and,
Right.
you know,
It's a better comic book movie because there's more highbrow.
yeah,
Fuck you.
yeah, just stop being such a, like, pedantically boring human being. Like, I can like The Dark Knight. You know what else I can like? Howard the Duck.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Or just staying in the Batman vibe. But just even say the Batman vibe. I can like The Dark Knight. I can like Batman 1966 with Adam West.
Or, you know what? Batman and Robin.
Yeah,
I'll
there
go
you
to
go.
bat for Batman and Robin.
Sure.
I will go to bat for that movie way harder than most people because it, you know, again, let's talk about fast food cinema. Literal fast food cinema. It was
Chill.
made to sell toys, and I don't care. There's something about that movie being the Batman 66 of that 90s
That's
that
so
is super, super charming.
super entertaining. Arnold
Nice to
Schwarzenegger
meet
shouting out
you.
puns. Yeah, absolutely. How could you not enjoy that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's about a blast and a half is what I'm getting at. Like, I'm not gonna say it's a great movie by any stretch of the
No.
imagination,
Any
but
movie with
do
the
I
Bat
enjoy the
credit
hell
card.
out of it? I absolutely do.
100% agree. 100% agree. So, yeah, absolutely. So there is no such thing as an elevated any kind of movie. They're just movies, and you can like them or you can dislike them. Me,
You know what's funny to
I
me?
choose to like them.
Elevated horror also just sounds like the people who call movies Oscar bait when it's just a highbrow drama. And
Right?
you're like,
Yeah.
why are we calling it that? It's a drama. It's a
Pretty much.
highbrow drama.
Almost any like biography is considered Oscar bait because it's going to be an actor playing a real life person. All of a sudden, it becomes Oscar bait and it's elevated.
Yeah.
No, not necessarily.
No. I mean, is American Gangster Oscar bait? Absolutely not. That's just a banger of a fucking film.
100%, absolutely. So it is what it is, but I'm glad we've got that out of our system. I'm glad that we're on the same page. Elevated nothing. Let's talk about the elevated adventure movie, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. I'm sorry, I couldn't finish out the same thing.
You tried so hard, and I saw you breaking, and I was like, I'm gonna let you wreck this. You know, I watched you careen right off a cliff. You tried so hard to do my segues. You really did, and I appreciate it. So let's go ahead. We're gonna get in that real fancy way back machine like you and I like to do. This time I'm saying we're gonna, do it old school, Back to the Future style. And I'm not talking the DeLorean version. I'm talking about the scripted version of, Marty getting inside a lead-lined refrigerator.
Well, that's a couple movies later. I'm sorry.
Oh, wait, yeah, about that. I mean, the movie that Spielberg produced back in the 80s that was originally going to have that came back around.
Imagine that.
Interesting about that now that I think about it. So let's get that lead-lined refrigerator, get dropped in the middle of a Nevada boom town with the bomb. Let's go back to 1984, the summer of 1984, when we are introduced to Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, the second film in the Indiana Jones franchise, the sequel, of course, to 1981's Raiders of the Lost Ark. But this time, the film is not the, rocking, rolling, Nazi punching adventure film that you remember the first film to be. We are moving backwards in time. This is a film that is actually secretly a prequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark, and it involves Indiana Jones going up against the Thuggee cult in a very dark chapter of the Indiana Jones franchise. A film that, to this day, you look at and stands out for many, many reasons, and I think that's why this film continues to be very divisive.
It very much so is, yes.
And here's what I would like to say on that subject. It's actually really funny to me how people think hating Crystal Skull is like a new thing, and it's the only time that Indiana Jones fans haven't liked Indiana Jones movies. I present to you Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. The thing that people seem to glamorize when it comes to looking back at the sequels is we love them now.
Right.
And we all look at them this way. But when these movies came out, and even nowadays, the fandom is torn. very frequently about their love for any one of the sequels that has come out post Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah. I
And
think it's
that
safe to say Last Crusade is the most loved
of
overall
overall,
of the
yes.
sequels specifically. But you're not wrong. They've all had their issues. Temple of Doom specifically was the Crystal Skull for a little while. It was considered looked down on. It was the surprisingly, and I'm actually I say not surprisingly, more the kiddie movie, despite how dark it was. Because I know we had this conversation. I've had conversations with other people. As kids in the '80s, this might have been our favorite one back in the
When
day
I was a kid in the '90s, it was my favorite.
because this was the one that had the most rollicking like adventure of the three. This one felt more like a fun time minecart ride, if you will, compared to the other
Right.
ones.
It was
This
a
was
it's a roller coaster.
yeah, it was a roller coaster ride, and that's some people say it against it now, but to me, it still feels it still holds up to me. I mean, we had this conversation also. We watched this last night or the night before, and we had a almost a brand new experience of it, almost like we were watching it for the first time, and how that pace was just rip roaring. We loved what we were watching, and despite the flaws that we might see along the way as grown ups see more than the kids do, they just didn't matter. They didn't matter because we had such a great time with it.
Yeah, it's funny because, this is a movie that I loved as a kid. As I got older, I enjoyed it, but started to have that backslide with it where I felt like that it was a little too dark, it was a little too plotting, it didn't quite get to where I wanted it to get to, and for some reason, I kinda just kept backsliding on it, and it became my least favorite over time,
Mhm.
but in revisiting it again, and I was just so much more locked in a way that I hadn't been with it in a while, and I started to just absolutely fall in love with it all over again in a way that I hadn't since I was young, and I started to have, like, very vivid flashbacks to watching it as a kid on VHS, and, that cover, that VHS cover that Drew Struzan art stays with me, the posters for this movie. I had the poster for this movie on my door as a teenager.
I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it, man.
Yeah.
It's one of those kind of movies that even if the whole the movie as a whole has more flaws than the first and third one, for example, the heights of this movie are some of my favorite Indiana Jones moments in the entire saga. They feel like the most Indiana Jones moments in the entire saga.
Well, do you know why? I find it very interesting, but a lot of what this franchise is mostly known to have become
Mhm.
comes from this movie. Like,
Yeah.
Raiders is an iconic film and, we all love that movie, but the look of Indy very specifically is very heavily inspired in pop culture now from this. The idea of these movies and these adventures being so temple heavy
Yeah.
come from this.
Mhm.
Like, this movie really doesn't leave Pancake Palace once they get there,
Right.
and it feels like the version of these that Indy to be. The games have leaned on them this way, the comics have leaned on it, the books. You start to notice some of the smaller things, like the 3rd act of this movie actually, and this is I've always felt this way, but the 3rd act of this movie is, I think, what people think Indiana Jones is all the time, because it is 30 minutes of almost pure adventure action.
Yep.
It once this movie starts with, and, we'll talk about it when we get to it, but once Indy's possession ends, that movie is nothing but action for about 30 minutes.
It's as soon as that possession ends, the John Williams score kicks in and doesn't let up for the rest of the movie.
No. And again, the John Williams score in this movie is just, I mean,
Oh,
it's John Williams.
it's
It's not
John
like we need
fucking
to
Williams.
gush, but I'm going
But
to. The
we
score is
will.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and it just heightens the film, and the way that he finds the crescendo for the theme music every moment that he can.
Yeah.
Good lord, brother. It's
Just
so
knows.
good.
He just knows when to
Just
hit that.
knows.
Just knows when to hit it. It's
So
so perfect that way.
it is. And you look at it overall, like, there's so many actual, like, iconic shots of Indy too. Like, when you look at any you know, paper or books or things, even videos, when people are putting together compilations talking about this franchise, there's a lot of these moments like Indy standing in the silhouette of him as the minecart light comes up on him. Like
Mhm,
that shot is used in so many things. You
mhm.
see it all the time. Indy swinging from a board to a board comes from this movie.
Yep.
Like a
In
lot of
the
these
on the
bigger,
bridge,
yeah,
the wood yeah, the swinging bridge
yeah, the
there,
run up to the camera.
right? Absolutely, right from that. Oh, it's
And
so
also,
good.
I mean, some of there is like specifically a callback from Raiders to this movie with the samurai with the swordsman.
Yep.
And you see stuff like that. But the funny thing is the original version of Indy falling off the cliff and no one knowing if he survived or not is in this movie.
Yep.
People always talk about it in Last Crusade,
Right.
but it
It started there.
originates here.
Mhm.
So it's a
And you know
specific
what?
callback to another movie later.
And you know what else I'll throw it out there now. It doesn't seem like we've had 4 Indiana Jones movies, and Short Round was only in one of them. And it
Yeah,
feels like he was he was one of the bigger parts of the franchise. And he was
right.
because he made such a presence in this movie.
Yeah, but again, played by the now Academy
Academy
Award
Award winning.
winning Ke Huy Quan,
Yeah.
which is so crazy.
Oh, man.
And seeing those two get together at during the Academy Award season again was
Heartwarming.
just so pure and heartwarming. And the fact that when Everything Everywhere won Best Picture and Ford was the one who got to present it to him, and the point when Ke Huy Quan comes up and he's so excited, and he's just like Ford pointing at him, being like, "You did it, kid!" Like
Right?
that was so cool. And again, that is so many years after the fact, but here we are, still celebrating that friendship 40 years later.
Yeah. It's amazing to think about it, and it's come so far, and we all love it because it all brings us back to our time when we love this movie. And I think this movie has had its ups and downs as far as acclaim goes. I think if you're a kid, you love it. You kind of fall out of love with it. But I think at some point you fall back in love with it, and you realize that it is just sometimes it's just what you need. Despite the
Yeah.
fact how it grew out of such a dark place. I mean, this is a dark movie at times because of where it
It's
came from.
super fucking dark. Are you
Yeah.
kidding me? Like this movie is l- dour. And the
Yeah.
funny thing is that so originally, as we know, Lawrence Kasdan wrote the original film. He was
Right.
offered the chance to come back. He turned down the chance. So Willard Hayek and Gloria Katz, who wrote American Graffiti
Mhm.
for George Lucas previously, decided to come on and write the film with him. Similarly, again, like they did with American Graffiti.
Right.
And the funny thing is that you would not initially think that the people who wrote American Graffiti are going to write something so dour and dark. But has even said he was getting divorced when he was making this film and he was feeling shit. And he was like, we're making it the darkest, most disturbing thing that we can basically, because this is how I feel. This is what I'm feeling. And it's in the film.
Right.
And so much so that this film created the PG-13 rating alongside Gremlins.
Yeah, these are the 2. Yeah, absolutely,
These are
and
the 2.
obviously so because I remember watching this going, "Wow, this is." I am not surprised that this became a PG-13 rating back in the day. So watching this thing, something like after watching Raiders and then watching this right away, it's like, wow, this is such a different kind of movie. It is different, much more darker, much more like this is horror. This is partially horror at times.
Oh, it
Uh,
absolutely is.
that's the way it is.
There's no
Partially,
denying this is absolutely a horror film. It involves possession. It involves cults. It is 100% the dark horror film version of an Indiana Jones film,
yeah,
which is funny
100.
because they attempted at one point. Chris Columbus's draft for the third film started in a haunted castle. Remember,
I do
like
remember that.
that was a whole thing when Columbus wrote his version coming off of the Goonies. That initially started with Indy in a haunted Scottish castle.
Hmm.
Which, God, that would have been freaking cool.
And we got to see a snippet of that in Last Crusade, where he does actually visit as a Scottishman visiting a castle, uh,
Yes, right.
very
If
briefly.
you are Scottish Lord, then I am Mickey
Okay,
Mouse.
mouse.
How dare he?
How dare you?
Not that I've seen that movie
A
a bunch of
billion
times.
times, a billion times
Um,
now.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
not even like I need to watch these movies, honestly, every time we cover them, but it just gives me a reason to rewatch Indiana Jones, and I'm never gonna say no to that. I'll
why
say
would you?
this, though. I do understand ultimately, too, why this movie is so divisive and why so many people may not like it, because,
Mhm.
again, it's dark as fuck, man.
It really
This is
is.
not like a fun movie. I mean, it is, but it's dealing with child slavery and black magic. There's humans being sacrificed and having their hearts ripped out. I mean, not that the first movie is, super child friendly and like heartwarming, but people still melt in that movie and whatnot.
Yeah,
But this movie goes real,
hard.
real hard for a film like this. And I think that
Yeah,
that's what makes it special too.
you got a cult chanting while a mole ram reaches into somebody's chest, pulls out the heart. The heart starts burning, and then they send the guy down, still living somehow, into a molten pit of lava. This is definitely at least PG-13.
Dude, well, not just and I gotta say, that sequence, I don't think I ever fully appreciated how tense that whole stretch of the movie is until last night while I was watching it. And again, the Williams score of it all plays a part in it, but the tension is very real in the way that it's built, and it feels so taut. Like
Right.
you're watching it, and it just you feel yourself getting tense, and you feel like you could snap as the movie is ramping up, and there's these like crazy vertical zoom in cameo or close-ups that Spielberg is doing at time to time too, with everything on the people chanting and the music building, and just dude, it's unreal.
It really
And
is.
that's one of the things that I want to say. Spielberg didn't have to come back and direct a sequel. There
Right.
was no world where he had to do something like this. He could have gone and done anything he wanted to. He was Steven Spielberg. By 1984, he was pretty on top of the world in the same way he has been ever since.
Yep.
But like he could have done anything. And yet he wanted to come back and do this. And man, he does not attempt to make a film that mimics Raiders. He
No.
makes a totally different film. And it's
Absolutely, and that came from both ends. Like Lucas decided that's why they made it a prequel to begin this. By the way, this is it's a weird prequel because I don't think many of us as kids realized it was a prequel. We didn't really pay attention to the
no.
fact that it was a couple of years before. Made us wonder later on, well, where did Short Round go? I don't even know. Which we'll talk about that because I have some thoughts, some questions about that actually that went on for the first time. I questioned that a little bit during this movie, or how he got there and where he goes from there. But it is like Lucas decided to go as a prequel because he didn't want to have the repeat of having the Nazis as villains again. He wanted to try something different and new, and he went for these different ideas. And Steven Spielberg said he had two choices. Like you're kind of screwed when they do a sequel either way. Because if you make it too much like the original, people will complain about that because it's too much of a copycat. If you divert too much from it, say, well, why don't you make it more like the original? Why are you so out of whack with the original kind of thing? So either way, you're screwed. So Spielberg decided to go more towards, well, let's make something at least try to do something original and different because that at least is more satisfying creatively for them.
Yeah, and you can feel it. He is having the time of his life
Right.
doing just that because this is him creatively flourishing and making a film that is oddly a like Humphrey Bogart, Katharine Hepburn comedic romance film
Right.
mixed with the darkness of Gremlins and Poltergeist because Spielberg is going through some things, Lucas is going through some things.
Yeah.
So the movie's got this like dour horror side to it, but it's still got that high-spirited adventure too.
It's,
And it
that's,
also has blatant James Bond homages as the film opens during the Club Obi-Wan sequence, down to the white suit that
yeah.
Ford is wearing.
It does. It's a very James Bond opening. Even the musical number seems like it's something right out of a James Bond franchise type thing. Although
Or
I was
again,
surprised.
those like 30s and 40s dance films.
Well, right, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Which Bond always kind of alerts to itself anyway. It feels like it's kind of same kind of situation. I always remember being surprised, like this is what we're starting Indiana Jones for this time. Okay, all right, I'm on board. The fact they named it Club Obi-Wan always is going to help me get into something because I love the nod. Um, but yeah, let's get into that. Let's actually get into that. The Club Obi-Wan sequence. What a fun way to start. What a fun way to start. It's totally against what you think because we don't expect to see Indy in a tux. We expect to see Indy in his costume, in his adventuring
Yeah,
costume.
in the tan shirt with the jacket and the whip.
Right.
You're ready for him to be out adventuring.
And nope, he's in there looking like he's a maitre d' or something like that. Right? It's more like James Bond. You're right, but I liked how it began that way. This is actually the closest we get to Professor Ford Professor Jones, because he's not Professor Jones in this movie. He doesn't get a chance to go back to the university because of how the plot goes. So this is his
This is a
attempt to
full
be an
Indiana
alter identity.
Jones adventure.
And this is him and his alter identity the whole time, which is it's a great start. But what a great beginning! What a colorful beginning! A good introduction to Willie, and we get down to business where we see Indy with these people. He got hired him to find the remains of Narachi, and they all sit around a lazy Susan, and all of a sudden it just becomes a fun twist of adventure. Let's turn this around. How many times we got to turn the circle around with different items on it as we try to have tense moments of negotiations.
Mm-hmm. It's so funny too because it's immediately a dark start too, because we're introduced to Indy with this kid named Wuhan,
Mhm.
who is like his right hand, and he is murdered immediately out the gate.
Right, In dies in
And
Indy's arms.
it's heartbreaking, dude. It's such a sad, and we spend no time with that
Yeah,
character,
we have no idea who he
and
is.
yet yet that look that he gives Indy in the onto the great what is it? The great unknown adventure.
Adventure.
I go first.
It's
And
like,
you're just like, no, no,
oh,
I don't want to be
no,
crying. Like, but it
no,
hits.
what's your name? Don't
Yeah.
die. What's your name? Pretty much.
Wuhan.
Yeah.
Wuhan.
It's gonna be at least
Great
probably
service
15
here.
viewings. 15 viewings before I actually remembered his name, to be honest with you. You
But
just told me about that.
I always love the reveal that he's working with him. The
Yeah.
great service here, and the way that this all plays, man, it's such a big, bolsterous opening. And this movie opens with about 15 minutes of pure action adventure
Mhm.
and ends with about 30 minutes of pure action adventure.
But
This movie really is very rip-roaring.
it is, and there's a lot of hijinks involved too. So it's not just action adventure. There's a lot of slapstick action adventure kind of stuff, like
Mhm.
the diamond and the ice on the floor, and everything getting kicked around, and Willie grabbing the antidote of the poison, the poison you just drank, Doctor
Yeah.
Jones.
Well, and
Uh,
what a fun, way to open the movie, right? Indy
right.
being swindled basically into being poisoned and attempting to find this antidote, and it's kind of, again, you're right, it's like a very slapsticky 30s high comedy
Yeah, kind of
type of
adventure.
opening, and it's really fun because it also gives Ford a chance to play Indy a little more chaotic than we'd really seen it before. Because
Right.
Indy's always been the everyman who gets himself into trouble, and he's just a dude. And in this one, he's a dude who might be dying, and he's very frantically trying to not die, and it's just done kind of in the most pristine way possible.
hmm Throwing the water in the face, the using the sword to knock the gong off, so I try to roll him by, so he protects
Yeah.
himself from the Tommy gun that comes out. Really grabbing Willie and jumping out the door, or jumping out the window rather, and flying down. Willie, as she's okay, I get the arguments against Willie. She's probably the least favorite of the indie women, and understandably so, because I'm not gonna lie. There's times where she gets a little very annoying in this film because she screams a lot, a
Oh
lot, a
my
lot.
god.
Oh my god! Oh my
Kate
god!
Capshaw gives her all, for
She
better or
does.
worse.
That's the role that was written for her. That's the one she played it to the best of her abilities, and I think she's supposed to be annoying. That's part of the charm. I think again, this had to do with Spielberg not wanting to repeat the movie of Raiders of the Lost Ark. So instead of getting the wise like wisecracking ass kicking like Marion, you get the conniving little selfish little gold digger, uh, but not adventuresome at all. Willie, Willie.
Yeah, and it's great.
Looking for the diamonds at all the time, but with those cracking stupid the ditzy wisecracks instead. The oh, Narachi's a real small guy kind of stuff. it's funny to
I
me. I
love it
enjoy it.
though.
Yeah,
It's and
exactly.
again, I like it as the Bogart Hepburn sort of like tense romantic drama comedy stylings of the 30s and 40s
Oh, yeah.
because it is again, it's still like harkening back to those type of things and it works. And at times is Willie super frustrating as a character? Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. But there are other times where I actually kind of like the character and I like the balance and you can't recreate or replicate or even chase what you were doing with Marion, right?
No.
Marion is a very specific character in a very specific part of Indy's life.
Right. I mean, there was a thought during the production, during the development, that they were gonna bring Marion back. Spielberg wanted to do that. Um, Seems like from what I'm reading, like, it seems like that was pretty much what they decided to use those unused ideas as part of the part for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, having Marion come back and the Abner Raverwood, the idea of that kind of thing happening. But instead, they went a different way so as not to repeat. And I'm glad they did because I mean, I'll flash forward a little bit into the future of this movie. The will they, won't they, sex night thing at the palace is some of the funniest indie stuff we have. Like the
Well,
banter
not
back
just
and forth between them is just great. It's wonderful.
and that feels almost Hitchcockian,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
I really like. And that moment later, again, let's talk about this movie having such an impact on pop culture over time. Andrew Stanton, to his credit, when he directed parts of season 2 of Stranger Things, season 2 or season 3, either way, he recreates this moment basically at one point when there's that whole episode where um the characters go out to meet someone to break the Russian codes. So it
Right.
must be season 3, right?
Yeah.
And we're introduced to what's his name with the beard and the
Right.
glasses,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
but they do the same thing
Yeah.
because there's an entire sequence that's played identically. And how do I know this? I tweeted about it as I was watching it, and Stanton liked that tweet back in the day
Oh, did
because,
they?
yeah,
Okay.
Stanton knew that he was doing a blatant homage to Temple of Doom.
100%. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Because it is iconic and it has become kind of a funny thing. There's so many great moments in there. Whether it's the apple, whether it's the will they, won't they, is it the Indy coming over to figure out what's going on and she's not getting what's going on. She's not getting what's going on anymore. That's not beyond that. I mean, one of my favorite lines in the whole movie. He's like, "I'm right here. I'm right here," and he pushes open the door by pushing the her rock breast. And she's like, "That's what it starts becoming like. I'm right here." To I'm right here.
Yeah, and she's getting all frustrated about it.
So
Dude, I mean, even once you get into the catacombs, right, of the temple itself, and Indy and Short Round getting stuck inside the spike room,
one of
and
my
the
favorite scenes.
"We are going to die." Well, there's 2 dead bodies out here. There's gonna be 2 dead bodies in here. The back and forth between them is so great, and then "You're right. Your other right,"
I
and
do.
he's trying to get her to put her hand in to grab the, latch, and "I'm not doing that. You do it." It just dude,
It's the comic
there's
slapstick
actually some
adventure.
great banter back and forth with them, and again, it does work in a lot of ways because it's doing a very specific vibe and feel of
Right,
a very specific type of rom-com,
right.
if you will, that we
Very much
just
so.
don't see. And Willie as a character doesn't get a lot to do. And what's interesting, there's a great video you guys should look up on YouTube about the lost version of Temple of Doom. I was telling PLD about this earlier, but if you look it up on YouTube, this guy breaks down a lot of what was in the script that we know was filmed because there's still pictures of it that exist. So these
Yeah.
scenes are out there in some capacity. Um, Probably lost in a vault somewhere that we'll never find again. But Willie, unfortunately, to her discredit, was she had an entire sequence taken out of the film that arguably probably would have made her character stronger at
Mm,
the end of the day. And I think it would have probably killed a lot of the conversation around that character being so helpless. You have to remember she's also a Hollywood actress and things like that. She's just in like way over her head in an element she does not know.
Right.
Indy as a character has been doing this his entire life.
Right.
There's a reason he's so calm.
Absolutely. She's seen death many a times. He saw Nazis getting the she hadn't yet, 'cause it's a prequel version.
Not
But
yet,
he's
but
had
I
these
mean,
adventures.
well, like, to that point, the 12 Bantam books that came out, in the 90s are all set pre-Temple of Doom.
And there's a whole Young Indiana
So
Jones series also. So
right, correct, which, again, he's been doing this his entire life.
right.
It is not lost on him that he is not that this is how things are.
Right.
So it's not I'm not discrediting that fact that people may not love the character. It's a choice. It's an artistic choice, and it's not for everyone.
Right.
But I've over time very much come around on her in the film and the character.
I will say, like, it's funny to me is I never really cared either way. I kind of was fine because I just didn't really care. I thought it was funny when I was a kid. I fell out of love with her as the things went on. I saw more of the annoying factors, and I saw how she was just such a damsel in distress kind of thing, and it kind of got annoying. But then I really recently came back around to her and what they were trying to do with her, what she's trying to do, and I think she succeeds at what she's trying to do. Yes, she screams a little too much at times. I'm not
Oh,
gonna lie. But overall, it's a small price to pay when it comes to the overall satisfaction of the film, and she fits the role it's like a puzzle piece, and she fits it exactly what needs to be there.
yeah.
Uh,
Oh, absolutely. And I think that at the end of the day is so interesting. And again, it just makes for a very manic version of this movie that is so different. And I like that vibe. And the more I think about it, and again, like I said, after rewatching it last night, I've seen this movie 100 times, but I had never been as dialed into it in the way that I was
yeah,
this time.
I
Like
hear you.
since I was a kid, probably. And I really liked their dynamic. And the more I started to look at it more in a Bogardian sort of capacity with Katharine Hepburn, I went, "Oh, man, that's really fun."
Yeah. Well, speaking of being dialed in different ways, I had a discovery this time, and we'll talk about it now. So this is going back more towards the beginning. After the Club Obi-Wan sequence, they get out of Club Obi-Wan, they actually jump out the window, and we land in the car, and we see this little Asian kid, short round, driving the car with bricks on his feet. That's how he's getting around. And again, Ke Huy Quan, brilliant, has such a
So
presence in
good.
this film. It's
So
like
good.
he's matching up with Ford. Harrison Ford, one of the greatest actors we have, action heroes, everything. What do you want to say of our time and of that time? And he's toe to toe with them and not losing ground at all. But I had a
"I
question
very
about
small, you cheat very big."
big. Actually, he's very big. The guy, like, he started to smile on his face, and then he takes out the card. Oh no,
Oh,
no,
but
no!
yeah,
They
because
start talking.
Short Round's cheating him for money too. Oh my god, dude, there are some of the lines that he delivers that are so good, but that one is my favorite. "I very small, you cheat very big."
Big. You're no fan. You're no fan. And of course, the no time for love, Dr. Jones, as they're trying.
Oh, of course.
It's so good. Um, but my question now is this: I never really thought about this as a kid, so I almost feel like, do we have clues that, and maybe somebody else is, maybe I'm just dumb and people have seen this before. How long has Short Round been with Indy? Because did he actually find Short Round on this adventure while he was looking for Narachi? Is that what happened?
That's a very possible.
Because it always felt like they'd been together for a long time, but that doesn't really make a lot of sense. If Indy finds his kid after his parents go pickpocketing him or whatever, this is a college professor when he goes home. So if he had gone home with this kid, he would have been. Did he keep the kid for a while? Did he just like steal the kid? Did he would have set him up for adoption? I mean,
Yeah, there's many questions now that I have
I've
that
never thought of that.
I never even thought about that.
So I
Yeah.
almost feel like he must. I think he actually, while he was looking for Narachi, found out Short Round. That's part of this whole adventure, and yet they still feel like they've been together for a while. But it also kind of makes sense to what happens after this is over. Where did he go? Where was he for Raiders and Last Crusade? Well, the college professor isn't being a single father at this point. So I don't know. It's kind
Right.
of a lot of questions to ask, but
Well,
maybe we'll
and what's
find out.
interesting too, to your point, right? We also never saw any of the stuff with Wuhan,
Yeah,
and then he's never referenced again.
right. He is the
Like,
Jacques. He is the Jacques of Temple of Doom.
well, originally there was a scene once they fell into the cab, Short Round tosses the tickets back to him and
Right.
goes, "All three tickets are here." where's Wuhan? And they have this moment where Indy goes, Wuhan's not coming, kid. Again, this you can see all this in that lost video too, the lost version of the movie. But then Short Round kind of gets sad for like half a second. Then he goes, well, don't worry, Dr. Jones. I'm your new bodyguard now, your new best bodyguard or something. And that's also why he's trying to take care of him throughout the movie so heavily, which I
That makes
thought
a lot of
was
sense.
kind of interesting.
Makes a lot of sense. Not gonna lie, I like that. I like that aspect.
And,
So
and of course, the chase sequence through China or the Chinatown area is just so fucking great. And it ends with the most random cameo that you may not realize is a cameo that you're watching of Dan Aykroyd.
accurate with a
Because
great English
Aykroyd,
accent.
yeah, with a crazy British accent, as Weber, who is the one who gets them the plane and gets them out of the country.
Yep.
But I think about that all the time, and it makes me laugh.
Me too. It's kind of like Dan Aykroyd in this. It kind of reminds me of God, what's his name? John Ratzenberger in Empire Strikes Back. I kind of like
Yeah.
weird out plays like, whoa, look at that. That's who that is. Oh, okay. Speaking of the
this one's even a
airplane,
little more random because unless you're paying attention, you may not know it's Aykroyd. Like I know now in hindsight, it clearly sounds like him,
right?
but you never like fully see his face.
That's true.
Whereas the Ratzenberger one,
At least
it's
you get
like
a view,
very focused. You know who that is.
right? I guess that's
You know what I mean?
right.
That's Cliff from Cheers.
I do think the best part about that sequence is the way Harrison Ford can only Harrison Ford can do it. He has this, he looks out and he goes, "Nice try, Lao Che,"
Yeah.
and then close the door, Lao Che. So
what a great moment. It's so good. And then you're like, oh dear God, what's about to happen next?
Right. And they let you sit with it for a bit too. Like nothing happens right away. They just let you sit for it a little bit. Get a little more banter between them before the pilots decide to jump ship. And we get met with the scene, which I'm sorry, folks, for those of you who love the original trilogy of Indiana Jones and decry Kingdom of the Crystal Skulls. If you can't handle Indy in a fridge surviving a nuke, then how are you okay with Indiana Jones, Short Round, and Willie jumping from a plane with only an inflatable raft that lands them safely and then goes down a mountainside and over a big, large chasm into some rapid rivers, and they're completely fine as well there. To me, I'm like,
I question that a lot when people get all bent out of shape about that. And I'm always like, this is the moment for me where I'm like, I don't understand how anyone can be mad about that when this is happening. But dude, this the raft jumping out of the airplane, going down the side of the mountain and into the river is one of the best series of unfortunate moments you could ever ask for, where just everything that could possibly go wrong does and continues to as it keeps going. This scene is so thrilling. And it's so fun, and it makes me happy. But I also love once you realize the pilots have jumped out of the plane, and Willie's trying to wake him up, and so Indy finally runs to the front. And can you fly a plane? No. Can you? The way he says
delivery of that is just so perfect.
It's
so he sits
perfect.
there and looks at, smiles like nervously, and is like, "No, do you?" Of course not. Of course, Willie's not going to know how to fly a plane. It's actually kind of funny because I looked at this scene now knowing what we know, I'm going, "No, Harrison, you can't fly a plane."
Yeah, dude, I die the way, and the like kind of nervous smirk he gives when he says that line too. It's a very specific Ford look.
Yeah,
definitely. And it just makes me so happy.
I actually love even before that when she has to wake him up. She's like, "Oh, come on, Mr. Jones. You'll call him Dr. Jones." Okay. Sure. Dr. Jones, wake up.
They just deliver the lines so well. And of course, that's the moment in the movie that gives us the map.
Right. Which is set forth in Raiders, and it becomes such a staple. And I want it in my life as well. Just I want that in all my life journeys now to have the map go over. But then after the raft goes down, we get through. They end up in this village, and I'll throw it out there now. Obviously, this was made in a time where we were much less careful about how we depicted other cultures. It is what it is nowadays. We wouldn't made this probably the same way. But again, 80s movie of its time, you got to let it go. You got to let that kind of stuff go. But you get to see the villagers come into place. And what a great scene! Because Indy is obviously considered about the villagers and how they're coming off, and Willie is being Willie. It's actually one of my favorite Indiana Jones moments where she starts like refusing the food, and he just sits there with this big, "You're insulting them, and you're
Yeah.
embarrassing me."
And him just smiling at it as he's saying it. It's so good. And you know what's interesting about this? And this goes kind of back to what you were talking about earlier about this being a prequel. And like you watch it, and the way that Ford plays the role is actually so different this time too, because as the movie opens, we're seeing the Fortune and Glory version of him,
Yes,
who is a
yes,
little bit more free-willing in what he's doing, and he's not necessarily doing things fully for the right reasons.
right,
And I always thought that was so fascinating, and I never really noticed that change so specifically in such a way until watching it this time through and really focusing on the way he's playing the role. Because even later to that point, right, when they're having the conversation when they first get to the palace and he's sitting down and they're talking about the thuggy cult stuff, and Charter Lau starts to get real angry about it, and then he goes, "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were talking about folklore."
right,
And he delivers so many of the lines in a way that are just so different, because in Raiders, there's a very driven character,
yeah,
but it's driven for people and the betterment of the world and etc. In this one, he's trying to brush off any of that. Like he's saying, "I'm not sent by God to help you.
right, absolutely.
This was an accident. Our plane crashed. I don't want to be here."
I mean, let's think about it. Think about the very beginning of the Club One. He's handing Narachi off to these criminals, or basically who
Yeah,
wanted him for a diamond.
right.
That's fortune and glory right there. That's what that is. The near the future, and he would have wanted to keep Narachi for a museum.
Well, and it's so funny because then the last line of the movie when Willie's talking about it, and she goes, "I can't believe you didn't keep it." And he goes, "Oh, it would have just, ended up in a museum collecting dust."
Right. Yep.
And he knows that
So
it matters to these people, so he's gonna keep it, and he
yeah,
does. And I he lets them. And I think that that goes to show just how far he came, because even at the end of Raiders, again, we look back at it, but he's so mad at the bureaucracy around what had just happened.
right. Because he wants to study it and deal with the how it affects humanity versus let it sit in Area 51 as it goes to
Top
goes to show
men.
top men.
Uh just so it's a very interesting character change throughout the
Right.
movie, and it gets closer to the version of the character by the time Raiders obviously starts.
Right.
But it just he's so good in this movie. And again, I would say that there's something about Temple of Doom in particular, because he gets to play the role in so many different degrees throughout the
Mhm.
movie. It feels so varied in the performance that the perfect version of Indy is the Indy from this film,
Yeah.
because he's so dynamic.
That's a great point. I think and that might be why we all liked it so much as a kid and why we do come back to it is that the fact that despite what the story is, despite the darkness, despite whether Indie Last Crusade or Raiders of the Lost Ark is a better overall movie, this is probably the best version of Indiana Jones himself.
Yeah. And on screen, he is the version that is like the prototype. When you look at what Indy has become in pop culture, I feel like this is that version.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
down to the physicality. Remember, Ford went through an insane physical regimen
Yeah,
just to get into the specific shape he wanted Indy to look like in this movie, down to being able to have like that torn clothes and stuff. The funniest part of that being Ford then got hurt and couldn't do nearly as much of the stuff as he had initially wanted to do, because he had gotten so
right.
like cut for the movie. But
Yep.
the moments when it happens, it you're like, man, that is the character. And that again, one of the best things for me is you get so many beats of what you've anticipated him to be like forever. And that's why the third act of this movie, to jump ahead, is so fun and so exciting because you look at Raiders and Raiders' last 45 minutes is actually a lot more of a slow build once the truck chases happen. The
Yeah,
movie stops for a little bit, right?
that's right. Yeah,
And you aren't kind of on this pressure cooker, just insane momentum build that explodes for 30 minutes.
right.
This movie allows Indy to have pure 30 minutes of Indy adventure and action. And that's why it continues to be so thrilling when you get to it, because this is what this character should be doing. He should be swinging from the lamps and being able to grab onto things and slide down and jump into a minecart,
Hmm.
punching thuggy cult members. Like, this is that character.
Right.
This is who Indy should be and is to so many people, and it's because of this film. Not
Absolutely.
and that's not to downplay Raiders at
No,
all.
no,
Raiders
God, no.
creates the character,
Right.
and
Right.
it's a great building block for a better version of the character by the time you get to Temple of Doom.
Absolutely. And it's also a building block to why we should get a short round series or short round adventures
Yeah,
because
right.
one of my favorite part about this whole film is how Ke Huy Quan and short round in general just copy Indy the whole time. And it's done subtly a lot of times. There's so many documented, like there's so many times, a couple times like in the village where if you watch short round in the background, he just starts copying how Indy's standing, how he's
Yeah.
holding,
All
how
the
he
little
looks himself,
mannerisms and
a
things that
little
he's doing.
mannerism, one of those things. And then there's other shots which is not him; it's more Steven Spielberg directing it, or they showcase two things, like when Han Solo, yeah, Indy and Short Round are getting whipped. They go back and forth, showing them getting whipped almost the same way, and then even more so towards the end when you have Indy facing Pat Roach in round two. This time it's a thuggy cult member. Um, while Short Round is up facing the Maharaja, and they're punching exactly the same way. You got to
Well,
see
and
them.
even Willie's down below too, which I also love, where she's doing the same thing
Right,
because
right.
her
Just do it.
character starts to grow. She's getting stronger. And
Yeah,
I love
absolutely.
that Ke Huy Quan also is as Short Round. Like, the Short Round character mimicking him is great.
Yes, and it works. It just works so much. And
And
short.
what
Oh,
a interesting, like, directorial note
yeah.
to make sure that the three of them are so in sync in a moment. Like, they've been through so much in this movie to this point, and this is how they react to it.
Right, exactly. And you talked about it too. The last 30 minutes. I didn't even know what to argue it's more than that because I'd say the moment that Indy goes and Short Round go into like the secret passageway on, it really doesn't fully stop. There's some slower moments where Indy gets tortured and things like that, but it still kind of has that tense feeling throughout the rest of the film. And just leads from one bit to another. There's no real complete slowdown moment. Like Raiders of the Lost Ark had the rest moment. They actually had a rest and time for love. Time for love, Dr. Jones briefly, if Indy was to fall asleep at it. This is like always something's going on, something's dark is happening right until the end sequence where Indy comes out and is brainwashed and he's going to be killing Willie as a part of a sacrifice. Um, now this always threw me off, even as a kid. I don't understand it. With the exception, it's kind of I guess is a little negative from mine, negative view of mine. It's something I can't understand or explain. Maybe you can explain it to me. Why is it that we saw the sacrifice earlier? Muller Ram takes out his heart, it burns, and then he sends the guy down to the lava. In the Willie sacrifice sequence, we just skipped the hard part. But not only does he skip it, he like puts his hand over it and decides like, I'm not going to do that this time. With the exception
I
of we don't want to kill Willie. What's the reason there?
I always just assumed it was just to toy with Short Round and them because he
Okay.
knows that they saw it. I always just chalked it up to this was just him not doing it as a sacrifice. It was
Okay.
him doing it as a way to basically throw his weight around as, "Look, I can do whatever I wanna do."
I guess it's as good as reason as any, I guess. I can go with
You
that.
know, I mean, it's a headcanon-y sort of thing that you have to just kind of accept, but I
Yeah.
just assume that's what it is.
Like, and I'm not trying to really super detract from it. It's just something that makes me laugh. And I love it's something I love about movies. You have to make these headcanny things when things don't maybe quite add up. Not something I linger on, but
Oh,
uh
no.
It is one of
But,
my favorite
you know,
sequences, though.
and it's funny because there was supposed to be a third
Sacrifice.
well, not sacrifice, but a third sequence involving that
Oh, okay.
contraption and the lava, because if you ever notice, Charter Law just kinda gets shafted.
Yeah.
Um, you don't see him again once the pulley device, like,
Knocks him
lands
down or
on him.
whatever. Yeah.
There was a bigger part of that sequence where he gets back up once they get Willie up,
Uh-huh.
and he starts to fight Indy again, and he ends up getting pushed onto it, and Indy hits the switch, and he falls into the lava,
Oh,
and we were
okay.
supposed to see his skeleton and they shot the sequence.
Oh, wow.
The
Oh,
pictures of it exist that they did finish having that full fight. I gotta say, Shardo Law is, like, arguably one of the, like, weaker indie henchmen. He's just
yeah.
kind of a boring character. That's
Yeah.
the only bummer, really, is that he doesn't get a lot to do because they feels like they cut so much of what he was supposed to do out, because the scene earlier I was talking about that they cut involving Willie finding help and trying to convince them that the cult is underneath the palace.
Right.
He was in that sequence too, and he
Okay.
kinda downplays it as she's been on drugs.
Okay. That makes
And
sense.
so there's these sequences involving him where you would have seen he was a lot more involved than you initially realize. They just kinda cut it out, probably again, I would say probably for pacing, but it's just very interesting to me that those things are there because he's very clearly involved with this cult. But it also brings to mind a question I had never really thought about until tonight, or last night rather, when I was watching it, and now we're talking about it. But the British soldiers showing up kind of feels like a Deus Ex Machina, when reality it was actually set up that Willie had given them a heads up that this is what is going on and that they need help.
Right.
So it's just kind of very interesting that Blumbert does up when he
With the
does
cavalry.
with the cavalry, and it was because Willie had gone to them. We
Right.
just don't see it within the film.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's something I never really thought too much of until you just mentioned. It's one of those things, again, like I said, sometimes you just don't notice it when you're involved. When you're so invested in a movie, sometimes these little things like that just don't, they pass you by. No, you don't really think about it too much. But it
Right.
makes a lot of
And I
sense.
mean, no, it does. And it's not like the movie doesn't go out of its way to do something, because,
Right.
Blumbert seems a little uncomfortable with how things are already when they're all having dinner at the palace,
Right.
and of course that conversation is happening between Indy and Chartalal and Blumbert, and you have all of this happening around it, and then you're getting all the Willie being horrified by the food that is being
Right.
eaten at the table.
Right.
So sometimes I think people also might miss that the clear setup is happening in that,
Right.
because you get caught up in the moment thinking about the
The
horrific
humor.
things you're seeing.
Right. Which, by the way, is one of the things that I know some of the people have complained about, as far as like, well, that's kind of like they don't really eat that kind of stuff. But to me, I always read it differently. I always read the scene when I was a kid that the Maharaja and Chadalal were playing into the fact that the people think we're savages, so we're gonna like show them that we're savages, kind of thing. Almost like they were playing with Indy by offering all this food up like that.
Well, not just Indy, but also I
And
would argue Blumbert, because
yeah,
look how uncomfortable
right.
he is.
Absolutely. Like it's playing into the stereotypes they don't think of us any differently. It's like the hiding in plain sight kind of thing.
Mhm. I've always kind of read it real similarly. I can't be upset that people see it that way.
Right.
People
So I
that
understand it.
And I understand it, but I do think it's a very intentional sort of thing. Now, Lucas just kind of laughs about it. He just said he wanted to see horrific things done on screen, and that's
Right.
exactly what he did. But truly, I always felt like that was a very specific thing.
Yes. Agreed. Agreed.
And I always kind of dig the choice, because I think it also, again, it has become kind of a pop culture zeitgeist moment, because you all remember the first time you see the monkey head
Tear the
brains,
monkey brains. Yes.
or that shot of the snake being cut out and the other snakes coming out. Like,
The eyeball
it's
soup.
really horrific. Yeah, the eyeball soup. And again, talk about a horror movie that it's just horror iconography put
Right.
into an Indiana Jones film.
Yeah, pretty much.
So it's really affecting and it's really creepy and it's really fun. And it also has its place because Willie still won't eat, which leads again to the exact moment we were talking about with the will they, won't they sleeping together with the apple. The all of it is built off of this really fucking horrific scene. And I
Yeah.
really like that. And, we also haven't talked about with Willie as a character. People are so hard on her, but at the same time, that scene when they're out in the middle of the jungle and Indy's the one who's freaking out when he starts to see the snake, and Willie is treating, at first she's screaming because of the bat and finding for her
Right.
shirt after she gets wet. But then she starts to be so much stronger because she thinks it's the elephant.
Right. That's the
So
funniest
it's a
part
great
about it.
moment for her.
100%. 100%. I love the idea because of its indie. Because indie the whole time is like, women with this kind of thing, you're bugs. Just of course it's bugs. Of course you gotta chill out. Oh my gosh, fucking snake.
Yeah.
The dichotomy of that makes sense.
Oh, dude, it's just so good.
I love it so much. But yeah. So moving forward, back to the thing with the when they find the secret passage, which we talked about. Also, one more line I want to throw in there. We talked about the indie Willie chemistry at that point. The short round gets some good moments in there too. Like stand against the wall. He stands against the wall, pushing it, starts pushing the button in. I stand against the wall. I do what you tell me to do. Not my fault. It's a great. That's why it feels like they've been together for years. It's a great moment though.
It's so good. And again, I just really have fun with it.
Absolutely. That's it's all about fun at this part. Even watching the horrific things is still kind of like, wow, that's cool. That's fun. But nothing is as fun to me as one of my favorite moments from the movie. After the brainwashing, after Willie, the whole Willie situation, short round comes up. Obviously, like, not that it's fun that he slapped short round, but seeing him be dark and seeing Indy like push short round to this dark place when he burns Indy, wakes him up. You have this great moment. He grabs short round, pulls him to the side, and short round like see this terror in short round's eyes until Indy just whispers, "Hey kid, it's me," and winks. And then the John Williams score comes in, and they start kicking ass. It's like this is Indiana Jones right here.
Well, and again, what's funny is that there was another sequence involving it was the longer part of the sequence with Willie where we would have seen more of Ford
Right.
in the possessed state where he pushes her a little bit too because he's the reason she's ultimately captured.
Yeah.
Because we never see it within the movie.
Right.
We
Right.
don't.
That's right.
We never see what happens and why she's captured. So there was a bridge sequence, not like a actual bridge, but there was a sequence that would have bridged that moment basically, which would have been great to have put in too. And I love it. You're right. That is indie, right? And
Right.
we don't like seeing him possessed. We don't. It's uncomfortable. It's dark. It's weird. And I want to know what it is about Lucas deciding that any middle chapter that Ford was in a trilogy, he was just going to torture him and put him through like the absolute worst shit because he does the same stuff to him in Empire Strikes Back.
That's right. Harrison Ford definitely knows how to take a torturing at this point. Thanks, George.
Yeah, yeah. Jesus, what did Ford ever do to George?
Gotta be made his door wrong, I guess. Maybe the door's stuck.
Good Lord. It's just so funny because he is beat. He has to drink blood to be possessed, which, dude, that is always horrific. The blood, again, talk about horror iconography. The blood and in a head being dumped into his mouth is just
so
truly
horrible.
fucking awful.
Horrible.
In the best way, of
Right.
course,
Absolutely.
but truly fucking awful. And I love these moments of like Indy whipping down to go to where the Shakara Stones is in the temple too, because again, to me, what Indy has become, so much of it is those little moments like that. And little things, as weird as that sounds, this movie is full of those moments.
Full of them.
And when he grabs that stone in his hand for the first time, that look on his face, that is just as iconic to me as him getting down and looking at the fraternity idol at the beginning of Raiders.
Yes.
but it's such a different look because, again,
Agreed.
it's the fortune and the glory of it, right?
Absolutely.
And that look of pure power and this, like, almost awe that he realizes he's holding in his hand, and there's just, like, this smile that he has that he does not have a smile like that when he sees the fertility idol. The idol is being looked at as a very different thing, and I love that. It's a small character thing,
Mhm.
but it's so big in the grand scheme.
100%. I totally there with you on that as well. What a great moment.
It
Um,
is. It just works.
it does. And you know what else works? And it's again, it does fly in the face of my theory that they just met. The idea when Indy and Short Round exchange hats, it's
Mhm.
just this great moment where like they put them together. It's just a family moment. That's again, it's just the Indiana Jones. The theme is playing slowly, and they look at each other. You're like, God, I love you guys. God, I love you guys.
They're just so good together.
Yeah.
It's actually a little bit of a bummer they never really found a better way to bring Short Round back.
Yeah.
And I know
Unfortunate.
that it was also mostly because it seems like they always tried to rotate characters, but I mean the truth is it's not really as true post Temple of Doom because Sala comes back in 3, Marion
Mhm.
comes back in 4, spoiler alert. Like
Mhm.
he's he's got a couple of new characters around him, but I mean, you were always finding ways to bring back certain ones, so it's a little bit of a bummer that Short Round unfortunately got the short end of that stick because that
Mhm.
character is so fantastic and you could have done so much with him and you still could. There's a world
Okay.
where they give Ke Huy Quan a movie or a TV show or
Okay.
something because if you saw everything everywhere all at once, he can still deliver action.
Oh, yeah, he can. Just as
He's
well,
good
if
at
not
it.
more. Yeah, he's very good at it, and he can totally do it. If Harrison Ford can be Indiana Jones at 81, then Ke Huy Quan can do it at however old he is. What, 40s probably, maybe? If that?
Yeah.
I don't really know. Let me see how 50, all right, 51. That's fun. He's 51. Wow. That surprises me. But either way, yeah, he could still easily lead that series at that point. One of the
Yeah, I
young
mean, it
men. The young men.
he's still young, you could do something. I just think that it's especially now, it would just be such a mistake
Yeah.
to
Let it go.
not do it, and let's capitalize on the fact that, he's doing this.
And let's be honest, yeah, he'd want to. He feels like he wants to come back for that kind of thing. He's actually been asked about it. He would love to have an indie moment for sure.
And he
Um,
should.
absolutely. So we get the big fight sequence, which you talked about earlier, with the thuggy cult member Pat Roach this time, which is what it is. There, Pat Roach is as much part of the Indiana Jones saga as anybody else is at this point. What a
Yeah,
great fight this is!
the choice of painting him brown is
Yeah, I
not
was kind of
great, uh, admittedly,
alluding to
but
that.
I
Yeah,
need a Pat Roach fight scene
right.
in my indie movies, and dude, the Mine Belt sequence
So
is
good.
so great, especially because the tension with Indy being possessed by a doll
Hmm.
that continually is stopping him from fighting the closer he gets to this compact smashing machine
Hmm.
that is just gonna that is flattening rocks.
Hmm.
Man, talk about an all-time great scrappy fight sequence.
Yes.
It's so
So
good.
good. It is so good. Using the rock, using the big rock over there, using the whip. This and the ending of it's great too. When Pat Roach gets his costume piece there, his dressing caught in the masher, the rock smasher thing, and Indy even tries to help him save him from that. Even that's too terrible for him, but he can't do it. He goes, all sees just the blood going around. It's like a horror. It's a horror movie. It really is.
No, it totally is. Like, there's no denying that at all. It is absolutely a horror film, and that's continually, again, kind of proving the point of just how dark this movie is. But that's another one when once Short Round gets the dagger out of the back of the doll and that Indy's theme swells again, and you hear the
Mm,
Raiders March as Indy looks up, and it's not just the Raiders March, it's the triumphant version of it where he looks up, he realizes he can do it, and he stands up and he just starts beating that dude.
yes.
Man, it is so good.
Oh,
And
so good.
no one throws a punch like Harrison Ford
No, especially in the
at
80s.
all.
Especially in
No.
the 80s.
And I love that he's still able to do that. And the sound of an Indiana Jones punch is just unrivaled.
It really
And
is.
it just works, man. And I love that moment. I get so caught up in it. And again, this whole sequence for about 30 minutes is nothing but pure blockbuster filmmaking. It's some of the best blockbuster filmmaking ever done because
Agreed.
you lead from this to the minecart sequence. And the fact that we have not even talked about the like 10-minute long minecart sequence in this movie is almost absurd
I
because there's so
know,
much other
right?
stuff to talk about. But this scene is everything that we love about an Indiana Jones movie. The minecart
And
sequence is thrilling in a way
yes,
that nothing else is. Honestly, it might be the most thrilling sequence in the entire franchise.
it might be. And it might be also, it might be the most unbelievable. Some of the problems, some of the stuff that happened, some of the stuff couldn't happen, but it doesn't matter because you're all along for the ride in this one, which is why you have to surrender yourself to that kind of thing. You surrender yourself to disbelief. It's like the Fast Fear franchise Furious. You got to surrender yourself to some of this stuff. Um,
Yeah.
but it works and it's fun and it's exciting. And watching Harrison Ford careening around in a minecart with bad guys left and right, jumping the tracks, it's so exciting. It's so indie. How can you go wrong? Really, you just gotta let yourself
You
go and
can't.
enjoy it. No, can't.
You really can't. And the incredible thing is the sets,
Yes,
the music, the
production
look
stuff.
of it, like the red tone to all of it. Everything about it is just so spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
And I
So much.
can't get enough of it as I watch it. And I just find myself lost and enamored every single time, man.
Fun.
It is absolutely so much fun.
It doesn't give you a chance to breathe, and I'm here for it.
No, absolutely not, man. And I just God, what a goddamn sequence. And there's miniatures involved, there's puppetry involved, which you like really don't notice if you're not
Yeah,
paying attention.
yeah.
And when they are initially wanted to do the Indiana Jones ride at Disneyland, it was thought that it might be a minecart sequence. But they still managed to pull certain things from it, like putting bugs into the ride,
Right, right, right,
spike room when you're like walking through the park.
right.
Things like that are always very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And it leads to one of my favorite gags in the franchise, where they are going close to the wall, and Harrison Ford or Indy has to jump out and try to stop the minecart speeding with his feet. Um, it's burning his feet. They stop it just short, of course. Of course, as all heroes do, just short of the wall. And you hear him go, water, water, water. And then all of a sudden you see the big wave of water coming. Water, 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 water.
Yeah.
He's running out. It's so great. It's so fun.
Well, they love to they do that the joke too with Han and the stormtroopers with
Yes.
Indy also. And they love to do the zoom in on Ford and then have him panic and run the other direction. Like it's a thing Lucas has done with him time and again, and they do it here twice in pretty close succession, which makes me so happy.
Yeah, because Harrison
Because
does
it's
it so
great
well.
work,
That's what it is. It basically, he sells it completely, and you're all in with him. You're like, oh shit, here we go.
Oh, absolutely, and that's dude, it's so good at ratcheting up, again, the tension of it all, right? And
Oh
making you
yeah.
go, "Man, this is
Uh,
so good."
Yeah. And then how can you follow up the Minecraft, I'm talking video games now, the minecart sequence, but the probably what stuck with me most as a kid to this day, it's the bridge sequence. What a great Indiana Jones moment. Get Indy trapped in the middle on this creaking bridge. We got thuggy cult members on each side. Got Muller pushing Willie and Shout Round off on the bridge to the side. And we're kind of in this like standoff, and you decide, well, the only way to break the standoff is to get a little nuts, as Michael Keaton would say. And I love Short
He's not
Round.
nuts, he's
He's
crazy.
crazy. It's a great thing. You gotta love it when she realized what's going on. She starts breaking down. Oh my god! Oh my
Oh
god!
my god.
God! Oh my god! Is he nuts? And then of
But
course they
that
just
it
the
also
short
gives
round.
Ford the chance to deliver, in my mind, one of the best lines in the franchise, which is, Molaram, get ready to meet
Yeah,
Kali in
in
hell.
hell. And that's
And
the
the way he
facial.
says it, yeah,
It's
like,
over
he knows.
exaggerated. Oh
Ugh,
yeah. And I love the fact too you watch because you see what's happening too. Because you see like him with his feet like wrapping his feet around the wire a little bit. You're kind of like, oh my god, he's gonna do that. He's gonna do what I think he's gonna do, isn't he?
dude, it's just so damn good, and it
It
works
is.
so well, and you know what's funny too is that we were talking about this earlier, and I kinda mentioned it, but they even have the callback to the swordsman
Yes.
from
Yes.
Raiders, which it's funny that this is a prequel and there's 2 of them, and he doesn't have a gun, so he can't deal with it, and it's a great moment if you watch it out of order, or, like, you know what I mean? Where if you
Right.
watched this first and you had never seen Raiders, it's a great moment, which makes it funnier in Raiders, but if you've seen Raiders, it's also funnier because it's double swordsman,
Right.
like, your everything in the sequel is bigger, if you will, and they really lean on that,
Right.
and that's one of those things that it just works.
It does. You're
It
right. It
just
does.
works. It's just so fun. It God damn, man, like,
What a movie.
the more we talk about it, the more I just fall in love with it more in the way that I was last night while I was watching it again.
Yeah. Same. Same. Love it so much. I mean, we got of course the final sequences. Muller Ram, short rounding and Willie are climbing up to the top of the bridge. Muller Ram has fallen down to the bottom. We have the great final fight between Muller Ram and Indiana. And of course, he goes to cover the heart, and Muller starts to try to go for Indy's heart. Indy, of course, does not let that happen. And eventually, Muller falls to his death. And what a shot that is, by the way. I always get impressed watching it. I know it's like a dummy, or so I know. I think it's a dummy is how they did it. But how he falls on the cliff, his head bounces off the wall, and then he goes to where all the alligators are. It's brutal. It's a brutal way, but I buy into it because I'm all invested in the movie. And we get to the point where you mentioned this the precursor to the more famous Last Crusade bit, where he is over the hill, over the off the edge of the cliff. You don't know if he's going to make it up or not, and you just see the hand come up, and you know that he's made it up last bit, and he has survived the day. And Indiana Jones lives and wins the adventure for the day.
I mean, as he should, right?
Right, absolutely.
Like, that is 100% true to the character and the world, and it's what you want. You don't want Indy to lose at the end. You want Indy to come up triumphant, and they go back to the village where they originally were, and man, we didn't talk about this, but when they're in the village and Indy is having to translate what happened from the shaman in the village,
Right.
it's fucking dark. And
Yeah, it
that
is.
look on his face when he goes, "What?"
What?
Like, he's translating everything and he stops and he double takes. And she goes, "Well, what did he say?" "The children. They took the children."
Right. Yeah, it's a
Or "The
dark
children are
moment.
gone." Like,
Right.
you're just horrified by the whole thing because they're also breaking down the fact that after the stone was taken, the cattle died. The
Yeah.
Everything died around them, and they were losing everything.
And then
And
Indy brings them
Indy
all
comes
back.
back. Yeah, and you have this moment as he's walking back, and you see life already being brought back to the village. And the shaman even says that when the life came back to the village,
On your
we
way
knew you
back.
would be back. Yeah.
Right.
And I loved that. It's such a
Yeah.
great line. And it's funny too, because I have to wonder, and I had this thought. So they had 3 of the 5 Shikara stones. 2
Right.
of them are at the bottom of that river. It'd be real easy for someone to start trying to do this all over again if they want
100%.
to pick up where Molaram left off. Just saying.
Just saying. Hopefully, no one else knows about him. Hopefully, all be Dougie, you're dead, and we don't have to worry about that ever again. At least, But we do
Yeah.
have the happy ending where the kids come back. Everybody, the village is going nuts. Indy and Willie share a nice romantic moment that is doused on by a short round and the small elephant, which we like. And that's the end of the movie. We have an end adventure. Despite the darkness of the movie, despite Steven Spielberg and George Lucas's issues, we are left with a happy ending, and Indiana Jones lives again. I love it. Any last thoughts about the movie before we start wrapping up?
I mean, I don't know how much more I can say, man. Like, this movie is about as thrilling as they come.
Top notch.
It's not Raiders, but it's not trying to be. And I think that's the thing over time as you revisit these movies and re-engage with these movies, the more that you can appreciate the fact that they tried to do something so different, the more you can appreciate the movie itself, and I think that
Yeah.
really matters. I also wanna say we didn't bring up, but Emmerich Prairie as Mola Ram is just, like, an iconic villain
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
franchise, and it's interesting because he doesn't get nearly as much to do as someone like Belloc, but
Right.
at the same time, his presence because Curie just delivers a performance that is haunting and creepy and awesome all the way
Yeah.
through, and you can't not love it. And so you have this iconic villain in a movie that is dark and brooding and just so intense, and yet it's so hard not to just love the damn
It
thing.
really is.
And the more I watch it, man, the more I realize this is exactly what I needed the franchise to be at this moment, whether I realized it or not. And the more I really embrace that side of it, it's hard not to just love it.
Yeah, it is. It's really. I mean, I get people having misgivings about it. I get people might not like the dark horror aspect to it a little bit. It's a little too much for their Indiana Jones. I can get that. End of the day, it's still all so much indie, and so like just I don't know. I can't say it anymore. It is Indiana Jones, and that's where I land on it. So, all right,
Yeah, man.
let's rank the
Yes.
film. Let's rank the film. Obviously, last time we gave Raiders a perfect 11 out of 11 because we always turn up to 11 here on PLD Projects. What do you want to give the Temple of Doom?
It's tough because there's a part of me that it's like, I just want to give it an 11 almost out of like how much I just had the world's best time watching it.
Yeah, same, man. I get it.
And I don't think it's perfect. I have my own misgivings about the movie. But goddamn, is it not just, like, perfect blockbuster filmmaking all the same? So I go back and forth on how I wanna do this, but it's just not Raiders, and
Right.
that's just kinda at the end of the day, that matters to me.
Yeah.
As much as I love the movie, it's just not Raiders.
Right.
I'm gonna give it a 10.5.
Okay.
I can't
Um,
knock it much farther without feeling like I'm
Disingenuous.
yeah, because I almost wanna call it perfect.
It pretty much is on a lot of levels. But again, it's funny you keep saying it's perfect on a lot of levels, but we do admit there are like
Right.
faults to it and flaws to it. But almost like it's almost like it's good despite the flaw. Or maybe it's even good because of the flaws. Sometimes you can take a flaw and make it work for you. I give it a 10.5 as well. Same type of thing. Like
Yeah.
it is a little less than Raiders. It's probably gonna be a little less than Last Crusade for me. But at the end of the day, I would be hard pressed to knock it down much further either because it is. If I love the character of Indiana Jones so much, and some of my favorite Indiana Jones moments are in this movie, I don't see how I could knock it down much further.
No,
So
I can't either. That's kind of exactly where I'm at. It's not perfect by any stretch, but it
yeah,
gets close.
but it's close. It is close indeed. So that's where we end up. We are at a near perfect franchise. Well, here is the time where I tell you that even though we are a bi-weekly series, we are taking an extra week off this next time around because I'm going to be away. I'm going to be away the next time we would do. Normally, we doing 2 Mediocre White Dudes. We're doing Indiana Jones and Last Crusade. So instead, on PLD Projects, we'll be doing 2 class actions in a row. Next week's class action. The week after that will be another class action without me, just Maddie and Jarvie will be covering that one. But then we will be back after that. And back every other week after that to do Indiana Jones and further John Wick, then Friday the 13th. And it's going to wrap up a lot of our time for the next year, basically. I can't wait for that. But if
Yeah.
this is your first time here, let's hit that like, that subscribe, leave us comments. If you're listening on audio, leave us that 5-star rating. Let you know what you like. Let you know what you think about Temple of Doom versus Raiders versus Last Crusade. We're always up for a conversation. But speaking of conversations, where can the folks find you, PJ?
You guys can find me on Twitter and Instagram at PJ_Campbell. You can find me here hanging out, doing the thing, talking about movies, etc., etc. And then you'll find us pretty soon collectively also over at Reels Like the First Time, where we're going to be talking about Jackie Chan's Police Story, which I am very excited about.
You'll be hearing from PJ the entire time. Allison and I will be sitting there smiling and nodding because that's something he was going to
Way to throw me under the bus like that. I mean, you're maybe not wrong, but still, I'm hoping.
I'll try. I'll try to get a moment here and there where I can sneak in a catchphrase or something. But yeah, no, it's gonna be a fun time. It's gonna be. I got to watch that again for the first time in a long time, and I am mad at myself for not rewatching it sooner. So
yeah, I'm mad at you not watching it too.
I do love it. It is funny. It is funny. It is dramatic. It is action packed. It is everything you'd want from a Jackie Chan movie. So I can't wait to talk about that. I can find, as far as me, you can find me at Paul_News on Twitter. You can find me all over the place here on PLD Projects. The aforementioned Class Action, 2 Mediocre White Dudes on Film. You can find me at the review. Me and Lego going through V and V the Final Battle and the rest of that franchise. I have my Queen podcast, Crown Jewels. The Renaissance is coming. And another thing new to the channel that's going to be coming is Maddie and Jarvie are going to go through the Mission Impossible series as they lead up to Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. I might try to make an appearance at least for one of them. But they have already gotten one in the can that's going to debut soon. Yeah, it should be a great time. But like I said, if you like this, like, subscribe. And if you want to support the channel even further, patreon.com/PLD Projects. Got a great crew featuring Austin Goodell, Jeremiah Morris, Maddie Kearns, Brandon Buckingham, Jeff Alterman. We couldn't do it without you. We really appreciate you helping us keep the lights on. And to all of you out there, like Dave from In Live, who messaged me and told me how much he loved our banter, our pre Raiders of the Lost Ark banter. I hope you are still liking that, and I hope that everyone is liking our banter, because we always have a hard time believing that. We always like, what? That's the part
every time people say that that's one of their favorite parts about it, I really have a hard time believing that all the same for some reason. I don't know.
Hey, but I'm happy about it if that's the case. Yeah. But that's then. This is now. Stay tuned until next week, and of course, next week. I just did the same thing you've been doing the whole time. Stay tuned. Next 3 weeks from now, we're back for the Last Crusade. But until then, never underestimate the power of mediocrity. Goodbye, friends.
Peace.